welcome to the stories of Northern life from the Sault Ste. Marie Museum. We are going to chat about Canada's very first Italian club. Did you know that it started here in Sault Ste. Marie? The date was 1915, and the G. Verdi Lodge No. 1 of the Order of the Sons of Italy started as a group of 30 members and later grew to include more than 450. Well, really the group started in 1914 under the parish priest Reverend J.P. Martinez as a social club for young Italian immigrants. They met in the basement of Holy Rosary Church on Cathcart Street, later known as Our Lady of Mount Carmel Church. In 1915, they joined with the Order of Sons of Italy in America. The second home for the lodge was in the old Victorian Theatre Hall on the corner of Albert and Allen Street. Later meetings were held at the Mission at 671 Queen Street West. In 1923, the lodge moved to 582 Queen Street West, where they purchased a finished temperance building. During the Depression years, when the majority of people were cut from work, the members of the lodge spent their free hours constructing a new lodge on Cathcart Street. In 1932, the lodge was finished and they moved into the new building the club could call home. It eventually turned into St. Margaret's School in 1963 until 1967. Then, unfortunately, it was demolished in 1973. After 49 years of the origin of the club, they built a new lodge on Queen Street West. It cost $165,000 to build. Mr. Eugene Jurdy was one of the original organizers of the group. He said in an article that the group was first formed to mix and mingle socially with one another. One of their favorite outings was to go on a picnic to Bell's Point or Lays Bay. They would all meet in front of the church with their picnic baskets and beachwear, load up the back of a truck, and off they went to the beach for the whole day, and they would sing the whole way back. Another regular activity was playing bocce, or cards. In the early days of the lodge, they had a baseball and hockey team, and was in a rivalry with the East Enders, of course. The lodge also had a women's group, the Princess Mary Jo's Lodge. Mary Jo's was the last queen of Italy. Her reign only lasted a month until the monarchy was actually abolished. But nonetheless, she left a positive impression. The ladies' group started in 1931 in the tiny hall on Queen Street West. Later members of the club believed the wives whose husbands belonged to the G. Verdi Lodge wanted to have a closer companionship with them, and felt the only way they could accomplish this would be to form a ladies' lodge themselves. Miss Louise Largoni headed the little group of women who wanted to work side by side with their husbands to show this city that they were proud of being of Italian heritage. One of the more traditional ways they showed off their heritage was with the traditional tarantella dance. The G. Verdi tarantella dancers were quite good, performing at many events near and far. It all started opening of the Poe Locks in 1969, then being invited to the Central Ontario exhibition in Kitchener. In 1970, they participated in the local Italian Folk Art Society concerts and the Folk Arts Ball. In 1971, they represented Sault Ste. Marie at the Folk Arts Association at the International Folk Festival in Kingston, Ontario. Then, 3 months later, joined the Atlantic Regional Folk Festival in St. John's, Newfoundland. In 1973, they performed again at the same festival in Kingston and competed in Toronto as part of Columbus Week festivities. And they came away with the top prize of $500. They continued to do more shows and traveled other places like Brantford and more. In the very early days of the women's group, they would cook spaghetti in candlelight most of the time because the old Queen Street location would have lots of electrical problems. And they would bring the food to the Canadian Legion Hall on Queen Street East to sell in order to raise money for the men's lodge. They kept spaghetti dinners as a long-standing fundraiser throughout the years. In and around 1934, the members would put on stage plays just to cover the mortgage of that hall. The women would often gather for tea parties as well. Throughout the 1960s, they would gather with their hats and gloves. But these tea parties were not like others here in the Sault. They attracted 500 people for the very first tea party in the very new Verde Hall in 1964. 40 tables were set up and no seat was empty for more than 5 seconds. And of course, all the Italian breads, cakes, and cookies were offered with their tea and served by people dressed in Italian costumes. But the grand event for the opening of the new hall was a dinner gala. For $10 per couple, it was an invite-only special night. In the 1970s, they hosted a lot of fashion shows, showcasing local stores like Walker's latest fashions. And they always had a long list of entertainers. Another cool thing that the Verde Club did was that every year, daughters of the lodge members were chosen to become a Verde Queen. The girl chosen as queen is one who sold the most tickets to what was normally their Columbus Day dinner in October, but in later years, they made their own event out of it. The girls were often awarded with a prize of money or a credit to a local store. As both the women and men's clubs grew older in age, they shared a lot of the same missions from the beginning. But in the 1990s, the group was focused on serving the senior and disabled community, hoping to build a new sports complex for these focused groups. But in the meantime, every Thursday night, they had a party program, they called it, where seniors and disabled people were parabused to the Verde Hall on Queen Street West for an evening of cards and bingo. Many of these participants came from nursing homes or the chronic care wing in the hospital. There was always lots of fundraising and working towards making a better, more inclusive community throughout the G. Verde Lodge's history. And honestly, the lodge really didn't change that much throughout the years. Everything they did was in pursuit to create a happy social environment for the local Italians and tried their best to share their proud cultural heritage. I hope you learned a little something new about Sault Ste. Marie history today, and come back again next week for another cool episode on stories of Northern life. Ciao for now, and thanks for listening to my sick voice if you made it this far. Much appreciated.